Imagine for a second that you put your child to bed, you kiss their forehead, adjust the blanket, and walk 55 meters to a restaurant where your friends are waiting. You can see the apartment from your table. You go back every half hour to check. Everything seems safe. Everything seems under control. And then, during one of those checks, you open the bedroom door and the bed is empty. Your child simply isn't there anymore. There are no screams. There are no signs of a struggle. Just an icy void where your child should be sleeping. This happened. This is real. And what you're about to hear is the Madeleine McCann case, considered by true crime experts as one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in modern history. A true crime case that, 17 years later, still has no answer. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann forever changed the way the world views child safety, and what I'm going to tell you in the next few minutes will make you question everything you think you know about trust and about what can happen in a matter of minutes when you let your guard down. Stay until the end, because there's a detail in this story that almost no one mentions, a detail that completely changes the way you'll see this real case. It was May 2007. The warm air of late European spring hung over the Silver Coast in Portugal. Praia da Luz, a small coastal village in the Algarve, was exactly the kind of place that appeared in travel agency catalogs as the perfect destination for families. Whitewashed houses bleached by the sun, cobblestone streets, the blue Atlantic stretching to the horizon. It was the kind of place where parental concerns were naturally relaxed, where the sea breeze seemed to whisper that nothing bad could happen there. After all, what could go wrong in such a paradise? This seemingly idyllic setting would become the stage for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, a case that would shock the entire world. The McCann family had arrived a few days earlier. Kate, a doctor, and Gary, a cardiologist, were a British couple from Leicester who had decided that this week would be about rest, beach, and quality time with their children. Madeleine McCann, who was about to turn 4 years old, was the eldest, a blonde girl with a distinctive trait that made her unique, a mark in her right eye, an irregularity in the iris that created a pattern almost like a star. The twins, Amelie and Sean, were only 2 years old, 3 small children, 2 exhausted doctors, and a week of vacation that should have been memorable for the best reasons. The Ocean Club, where they were staying, was a complex of white apartments spread across well-kept gardens. Apartment 5A, on the ground floor of Block G, had a direct view of the pool and was just steps away from the tapas bar restaurant. The location seemed too convenient to be true. The distance between the restaurant and the apartment where Madeleine McCann slept was only 55 meters. The McCanns had developed a routine with a group of friends, other British families who were staying at the same complex. At night, after putting the children to bed, the adults would gather at the tapas bar for dinner. And here's the first point you need to understand about the Madeleine McCann case. The parents didn't abandon the children. They created a checking system. The system worked like this. Every 30 minutes, one of the adults would get up from the table and walk to the apartments to check if the children were sleeping. 55 meters, less than a minute's walk. They could see the apartment doors from the table where they dined. For them, it was like a babysitting service, only done by themselves. For the world that would judge this decision for the next 17 years, it was negligence. But on that night of May 3rd, as the sun set over the Atlantic and the children slept in their beds, none of them could imagine that this system was about to fail in a catastrophic way. Those 55 meters would become the most analyzed distance in any missing child case. And here I need to ask you something. Don't judge yet. Save your judgment for the end. Because what I am about to tell you will complicate everything you think you know about the Madeleine McCann case. 9:05 in the evening. Gary McCann got up from the table, leaving the group of friends and walking the usual path to apartment 5A. He entered through the back door, which faced the garden, and went straight to the children's room. The door was ajar, exactly as he had left it. Madeleine McCann was in the middle bed, her head on the pillow, breathing softly. The twins were quiet in their cribs. Everything normal, everything safe. Gary stood there for a moment, just watching. That instant of peace that every parent knows, when you watch your child sleeping and feel that the world is in order. He adjusted the door, leaving it ajar, and returned to the restaurant. Nothing wrong. Nothing abnormal. This would be the last time Gary McCann would see his daughter, Madeleine. But here's something almost no one talks about regarding the Madeleine McCann case. Gary noticed that the bedroom door was more open than he remembered leaving it. He didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe the wind. Maybe Madeleine McCann had gotten up to go to the bathroom and gone back to bed. There was no reason for alarm, but this detail, this small deviation from the expected, would be analyzed by investigators, journalists, and true crime scholars for nearly 2 decades. According to some investigative theories, Someone could already have been inside the apartment at that moment. According to later analysis, Gary may have interrupted something. What if he had arrived minutes earlier or minutes later? At 9:30 in the evening, another member of the group, Matt Oldfield, offered to do the next check. He was returning to his own apartment and 5A was on the way. Matt entered the apartment, went to the children's bedroom door, and here we have the second crucial detail of the Madeleine McCann case. The door was completely open, not ajar, as Gary had left it. Open. Matt found it strange, but not alarming. Perhaps Gary or Kate had come back quickly and left it that way. He looked into the room, but it was dark. He could see the twins in their cribs, heard their breathing, and assumed everything was fine. He didn't enter the room. He didn't go to Madeleine McCann's bed. He didn't check if she was there. He closed the door to prevent the hallway light from disturbing the children and left. And that decision, that split second when Matt Oldfield decided not to enter the room, would torment him for years to come, because the question that could never be answered was simple and devastating. Was Madeleine McCann still there at 9:30? Or had she already been taken? Did Matt see something in the dark and interpret it as normal? Or did he look at an empty bed and simply not register it? This time interval would become the center of the entire unsolved mystery. Time, that night, would become the silent protagonist of the entire Madeleine McCann case. Every minute, every second between checks would be examined, dissected, reconstructed by investigators from Portugal, the United Kingdom, and Germany. Because at some point between 9:05 in the evening when Gary saw Madeleine McCann sleeping and 10:10 at night, when Kate discovered she had disappeared, someone entered that apartment, and it is believed took a sleeping child without leaving an apparent trace. 45 minutes. This 45-minute interval became the most scrutinized period in any missing child investigation. Enough time to destroy a family. Enough time to create a mystery that, to this day, remains unsolved. And now we arrive at the moment you've probably already seen in documentaries, in news reports, in dramatic recreations about the Madeleine McCann case. But I'm going to tell you in a way you may never have heard before. 10 o'clock at night, it was Kate's turn to check. She got up from the table, leaving her wine glass half full, and walked the 55 meters that separated the restaurant from the apartment where Madeleine McCann should have been sleeping. The night was pleasant, with that Atlantic breeze that characterized the region. Kate entered through the back door, as usual, and immediately felt something different. It wasn't something she could name immediately. It was a feeling. The apartment was silent, but it was a different silence. Denser, heavier, the kind of silence you feel when something is deeply wrong, but your brain hasn't processed what yet. She went to the children's room. The door, which should have been ajar or closed, was wide open, completely open. And before Kate could process this information, she noticed something else. There was a draft in the room, a cold air that shouldn't have been there. She looked at the window. The aluminum shutter, which should have been lowered and locked, was raised. The window was open. The Atlantic wind entered freely into the room where her children should have been sleeping safely. That open window would become one of the most debated elements of the Madeleine McCann case. Kate felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She went to Madeleine McCann's bed. The sheet, decorated with dolphins and whales, was thrown aside. The space where her daughter should have been was just a void, a cold space. Kate felt around in the dark, searching for Madeleine's feet, her head, any part of the small body that should have been there. Nothing. She looked under the bed, checked the wardrobe, called Madeleine's name. No response. And then came the moment that would define the rest of Kate McCann's life. The moment when the abstract possibility of something terrible transformed into concrete certainty. Her daughter wasn't there. Madeleine McCann had disappeared. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann had officially begun. The panic that followed was not like in the movies. It wasn't an immediate scream followed by coordinated action. It was a system failure, a frozen knot in her throat. Kate's brain trying to process information that simply didn't make sense. Children don't disappear. Children don't evaporate into thin air. This doesn't happen, but it was happening. Those 45 minutes between Jerry's last check and Kate's discovery had changed everything. Kate ran back to the restaurant. The 55 meters she had calmly walked minutes before now seemed like kilometers. She arrived at the table where friends were still sitting, probably laughing at some joke, enjoying the wine, without the slightest idea that their lives were about to change forever. And then Kate screamed the words that would be reproduced in every news report, every documentary, every true crime analysis about the case. The words that would officially inaugurate the most famous unsolved mystery of the 21st century. Madeleine's gone. Someone took her. What happened in the following minutes was the first of many errors that, according to investigators, would significantly compromise the investigation. Friends, guests, resort staff, everyone ran to apartment 5A. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to find Madeleine McCann, and in doing so, dozens of people entered the crime scene. Fingerprints were overlapped, fibers were spread. Any trace that a possible kidnapper might have left was, according to forensic experts, contaminated by the wave of well-intentioned people who invaded the apartment. The Portuguese police arrived later, much later, critics would say, and when they arrived, they found a chaotic, contaminated scene, difficult to analyze with the precision that a case of this magnitude required. The raised shutter, the open window, the unlocked door, the disheveled sheets, all of this could tell a story, could point to a suspect, could reveal how and when Madeleine McCann was taken. But that story had been compromised, literally, by dozens of panicking people entering and exiting the apartment. And here I need to pause to contextualize what you're hearing. The Madeleine McCann case is not just another missing child story. It is, according to true crime experts and international media, one of the most famous, most debated, and most documented disappearance cases in world history. The media coverage of this unsolved mystery surpassed virtually any other true crime case of recent decades. And the reason we're still talking about this 17 years later is because, despite millions of pounds spent on investigation, despite 3 countries involved, despite hundreds of suspects analyzed, we still don't know what happened to Madeleine McCann that night. And here begins the part of the case you probably don't fully know. The part that British and Portuguese media turned into a spectacle of accusations, theories, and counter-theories, because in the weeks and months following Madeleine McCann's disappearance, the investigation didn't follow the path you would expect. There was no coordinated and efficient search. There was no perfect cooperation between authorities. What there was suspicion directed at the parents themselves. The Portuguese police, led by the controversial Inspector Goncalo Amaral, began to look at Kate and Gary McCann, the parents, who had spent the first hours begging for help, distributing photos of Madeleine McCann, making emotional appeals on television, suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. Why was the window open? Why was the door unlocked? Why did they leave the children alone, 55 meters away? And the question that hung over everything, although no one asked it openly, could they be involved in Madeleine McCann's disappearance? In September 2007, 4 months after the disappearance, Kate and Gary were officially declared arguidos, the Portuguese equivalent of formal suspects. Cadaver dogs specialized in detecting traces of human remains had been brought from England. These dogs, according to police reports, alerted in 2 specific locations, inside apartment 5A and inside the car the McCanns had rented weeks after Madeleine McCann's disappearance. For some Portuguese investigators, this suggested that Madeleine might have died in the apartment and that the parents might have moved the body. But here's what many sensationalist analyzers didn't adequately explain. Cadaver dogs, according to forensic experts, don't constitute conclusive evidence on their own. They are investigative tools, not definitive court proof. The dog alerts were never corroborated by direct physical evidence. According to available records, no conclusive DNA of Madeleine McCann was found in the car, no definitive fibers, no traces that could categorically confirm the theory that she had been transported there. The car had been rented 25 days after Madeleine McCann's disappearance. If the McCanns had concealed their daughter's body, where would it have been during those 25 days? How would they have managed to do this without being observed by anyone? And why would someone who had supposedly committed such an act make international appeals asking for help to find the victim? The accusations against the McCanns were dropped in July 2008 due to insufficient evidence, but the damage was done. Public opinion was divided. Half the world believed the parents were victims of an unimaginable tragedy. The other half believed they might be involved. And amid this polarization, the most important question of the Madeleine McCann case was often forgotten. Where is Madeleine? In the years that followed, the Madeleine McCann case transformed into something larger than a criminal investigation. It became a media phenomenon, a cultural obsession, a true crime case that generated documentaries, books, podcasts, and millions of online discussions. Theories emerged in droves. According to some, Madeleine McCann had been taken by a trafficking network. Others suggested she had been taken by someone who wanted a child. Some theories pointed to an accident covered up by the parents. Others indicated a predator acting alone. Each theory had its defenders, its circumstantial evidence, its internal logic, and none could be definitively proven or refuted based on available evidence. In 2011, Scotland Yard, the London Metropolitan Police, opened its own investigation into the Madeleine McCann case. Operation Grange, as it was called, cost millions of pounds and involved dozens of detectives working full-time. They re-examined every piece of evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, followed new leads about Madeleine McCann's disappearance, and in 2020, they announced they had identified a formal suspect, Christian Brückner. Brückner was a German criminal with a disturbing history, convicted of rape, robbery, and drug trafficking. He had lived in the Algarve region at the time of Madeleine McCann's disappearance. According to investigators, his van and trailer had been seen in the vicinity of Praia da Luz. Records indicate he made a phone call near the Ocean Club on the night of May 3, 2007. And most disturbingly, he was convicted in 2019 for the rape of a woman in Praia da Luz in 2005, 2 years before Madeleine McCann's disappearance. For many case analysts, Brückner represents the most concrete lead ever identified, the suspect who could finally explain what happened at that open window, in that 45-minute interval, in those 55 meters of distance. But as of when this content is being produced, Brückner has not been formally charged with Madeleine McCann's disappearance. He denies any involvement, and although the investigation continues, with German prosecutors declaring they have evidence suggesting Madeleine McCann is no longer alive, no body has been found, no conclusive evidence has been publicly presented. The Madeleine McCann case remains officially open as one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. And this is where we arrive at the dark heart of this true crime story. Because the Madeleine McCann case is not just about a missing child, it's about how we respond to the inexplicable. It's about how the media can transform a tragedy into spectacle. It's about how public opinion can form judgments without conclusive evidence. It's about how judicial systems can face limitations that seem impossible to overcome. Kate and Gary McCann lost a daughter. Madeleine McCann disappeared from that bed, from that room with the open window, in those fatal 45 minutes. And then the parents also lost their reputation, their privacy, their peace of mind. They were called guilty by millions of people who never knew them, basing their judgment on theories rather than evidence. They were forced to sue publications that spread unverified information about them. They were obliged to live under constant scrutiny, every facial expression analyzed, every word interpreted as possible evidence. They created an international campaign to find Madeleine McCann, raised millions in donations, kept public attention on the case for years, and they were criticized for that too. Why did they appear on television? Why did they seem controlled? Why didn't they behave as grieving parents were expected to behave? The truth, according to psychologists specialized in trauma, is that there is no correct way to react to the loss of a child. There is no manual that determines how someone should appear when living their worst nightmare. Kate McCann wrote in her diary, in the days after Madeleine McCann's disappearance, that she felt like tearing off her own skin, that she couldn't sleep without medication, that every breath was a conscious effort. But on television, she tried to maintain composure because she believed that was what Madeleine needed. A strong mother, an organized campaign, a systematic search, and the world judged her for it. The twins, Sean and Amelie, grew up in the shadow of their missing sister. They have no conscious memories of that night in apartment 5A. They were too young, but they grew up knowing that Madeleine McCann was taken while they slept in the same room. They grew up seeing their sister's face on posters, in news reports, in documentaries about the case. They grew up with the question no one can answer. Why her and not us? And Madeleine McCann, if she's still alive, she would be 21 years old now. An adult woman who perhaps doesn't know who she really is, who perhaps has fragmented memories of a previous life, of a room with dolphin sheets, of a family that loved her, of a night when a window was opened, or perhaps she has no memory at all. Perhaps she was raised by other people, with another name, in another country, not knowing she's at the center of one of the world's most famous disappearance cases. Or perhaps, as many investigators believe, based on available evidence, Madeleine McCann died that night in May. Perhaps her body is somewhere in the hills of the Algarve, or in another location that will never be found. Perhaps the truth about what happened in that apartment, at that open window, in those 45 minutes, has been lost forever. What we know for certain about the Madeleine McCann case is only this. On May 3, 2007, a 3-year-old girl was put to bed by her parents, 55 meters from the restaurant where they were dining. The checking system every 30 minutes seemed safe, and when they returned to check, Madeleine McCann was no longer there. The window was open, the door was wide open, and there was only an icy void where a child should have been sleeping. 17 years later, we're not significantly closer to knowing what happened than we were that night. We have suspects, we have theories, we have thousands of pages of investigation about Madeleine McCann's disappearance, but we don't have Madeleine, and perhaps we never will. This unsolved mystery continues to be one of the most debated and analyzed true crime cases of all time. This is the case that the archive keeps open, The Madeleine McCann case reminds us that the world is not as safe as we want to believe. That 55 meters can be an infinite distance, but half an hour can be enough time to lose everything. That an open window and a 45-minute interval can change a family's history forever. That the sea breeze can bring the unimaginable along with the salt. If you've made it this far, I need to ask you something. If this video about the Madeleine McCann case made you think, if this true crime story moved you in some way, if this unsolved mystery awakened something in you, subscribe to the Archive Mind channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next real cases we'll archive together. Leave a comment telling me what you think happened to Madeleine McCann. Your theory, your opinion, your doubt, because cases like this aren't solved by one person alone. They're solved by thousands of eyes, thousands of minds, working together to find answers that the official investigation has yet to provide. The archive remains open, the Madeleine McCann case remains unsolved, and you are now part of this search for answers.